Well, hello and welcome to the True Tone Lounge. Today we're honored to have in person, we have Duke Levine. Thanks, Duke.
Thanks for having me, Zach.
Yes.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, glad. Duke, of course, is in town to do some session work, but he's been touring with Bonnie Raitt for the last 2 years, 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, 2 years.
And, of course, he has an amazing history of, of course, his solo albums that we all know and love, and session work and touring through the years, and the artists he's worked with like Jonatha Brooke and Chapin Carpenter and Peter Wolf, Jay Giles Band, and all sorts of other acts. So we're gonna chat today, and it's really nice to be able to do this one in person.
Yeah.
So thank you for making the trip down.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah. So I guess the biggest thing from our last interview was, of course, the fact that you've been touring with Bonnie Raitt. So tell us a little bit how that came about.
Well, let me see. It was a lucky thing. Yeah, so I guess a few different people recommended me for the gig, and friend of many years, Hutch Hutchinson, who's Bonnie's bass player for 40 years, and we've known each other for a really long time. He's a friend, and I know that he threw my name in there, and as well, I got to know some of the band, and George Marinelli, who was kind of on his way out, which is why she needed somebody. Knew me and knew my playing a little bit, and I think the band, as it was, agreed that I was okay, and so yeah, that's kind of how it came about, and also one of the cool things was that I got to play about half the shows last year with George, the two of us, and it was all a blast, yeah, and George is just I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
He was here for many years, and great guitar player. Really easy for the two of us to play, and that gig was not really a two other guitar player gig, but it was really fun, and it was really easy. Hardly any talking about what are you going to do, what am I going to do. Just kind of fell together naturally. So, that's how it all came about, and I got hired and went out to do the rehearsals, and because I'm me, I figured, well, I do have I was hired for this gig, but anything could happen, and it's fair enough for any artist, we hadn't played together, so luckily it all went fine, and happy.
Yeah. Was there any audition process? Were you interviewed by Bonnie or anything like that?
No, not really. I mean, I had met Bonnie a little bit over the years, through Hutch, and I guess she might have known who I was, but no, that's the thing, and and I like to say I've never gotten a gig I've auditioned for, so for however that works out, I don't know, but fair enough.
No, that's the best way to get any kind of gig or job is to just by referral. Yeah.
Right. So it all worked out happily. There was no audition. We talked a little bit on the phone, and I got all the tunes. And she was really good about not giving me like everything she might do, and kind of paring it down. So, and I got them really well in advance, like a couple months at least. So that was really nice to have some time to spend learning stuff. And the stuff had evolved. I got I think a few live tunes, because they've all been, George had been playing with her for 30 years, I think, and a lot of, rightfully so, a lot of the gig was kind of, come up with his playing. And he's a really unique player, and some of the songs had morphed and some stuff added, so I got all that. And otherwise, there's a bunch of leeway in how you play on the gig. And she's got ideas, but really, there's, besides like signature lines and licks, there's you can basically play like you want to play, and you don't have to play the same way every night.
That's fantastic. Have that kind of freedom.
Yeah.
So what kind of input does Bonnie kind of give you on your playing?
Not a lot. I mean, the arrangements are tight, so it's not like a loose gig in any way. But like how you play within that can can be kind of free. Like I said, besides the signature lines or licks, she's concerned as I am about the sound of the guitars working together sonically, and I always think about that as well. So, and I think our sounds are far enough apart, and with George as well, he and I have very different sounds. So, and I think that's part of what made everything work, is trying to fit all that. 3 electric guitars sonically is a trick sometimes.
So how would you describe Bonnie's sound versus your sound, and why they work together?
Well, Bonnie's sound is like, everyone knows it, right?
Yeah.
What she sounds like,
Yeah.
beautiful, clear, basically like a Strat with a compressor, but just very clear and beautiful and present. And I love her rhythm playing too, her electric rhythm playing, I really love. And she plays an open tuning, so she gets those kind of voicings, And so one thing was, I play one tune in open D, I guess, and she's playing an open G. You could think maybe it might be similar, but the tones are so different. I tend to have a little bit of a darker, thicker sound that I go for. So that naturally contrasts with her. And playing a telly a lot, so that's, again, naturally different. But yeah, pretty far apart, I would say. Sometimes if we're both playing kind of rhythmic things, then you'd have to think about it a little more, maybe. Just kind of making sure they work together.
Yeah. Was this the first gig where you used in-ear monitors?
Yes.
And how big of an adjustment was that?
It wasn't. Yeah, it was an adjustment for sure. But I liken it to doing a session with headphones, and mostly our guitar cabinets are off stage, hers and mine.
Right.
So you're not really standing in front of an amp either.
Yeah.
And I think I could say, like, after doing it now for almost a couple of years, in many ways I've gotten used to it, and in other ways I would say if I miss anything, it's that the feeling of just playing in front of your amp, even if you were on ears, there is something that happens between a guitar and an amp and the speaker.
Yeah, they interact.
They do interact. But like I said, how many sessions have we all done where your amp is in another room and
Right.
you don't get that, and you just kind of don't even think about it because you're in the studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that, and what's really nice is that it can sound like a record in your ears. So, and that's really cool. Usually, like on any other gig with wedges, my tendency is to get as little as possible in the wedge, even if it's wherever it is, even if it's a bigger place, just to cut down on the volume for one, and just, if it's, and it's usually, that would be on gigs that I know, so I know what everyone's doing, I know what the arrangement is. It's not like you're necessarily jamming and have to hear everyone in the band.
Right.
Perfectly. So I've gotten used to that, just to save on stage volume and hearing, just to get minimal. And it's always hear everything great, and just trust that it's all going on around you, but in the ears, it's like, it sounds like a record. And of course we have a fantastic monitor person and front of house, and a really great system, great ears. So I think it sounds as good as it can.
I guess it's a little bit surprising, but the amps behind the stage. I would have thought that Bonnie would have live amps, but yes, it absolutely raises the stage volume, makes it harder to sing and such. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was more for the front of house, because it really does make for a cleaner mix if you don't have a bunch of stuff coming off the stage, especially in theaters, and they. I don't think they always. I think she and the band started using ears not that long ago.
Wow.
Before I joined, but I think for a long time they had amps on. They had their amps cranking away on stage. And I do miss that a little bit. But the other thing is, the volume isn't as much of an issue. You can turn up the amp within reason, because it's still in a space. If it's a theater, even if it's off stage, it could be bouncing around, and it's baffled a little bit. But that's you don't have to think about that as much as if it was right on stage and pointing at people.
Yeah. What kind of amp? And you said that, so Bonnie's just using a compressor pedal and an amp and a Strat? Or?
Yeah, she's got some other stuff. I'm not sure exactly, but yeah, she's got her Strat that she's always had, that brown Strat, and she's got a couple others for like different tunings, and a couple acoustics. She still plays a couple of great finger-picking acoustic tunes, and she has, what is she? I think she has a Bad Cat.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she's used different stuff over the years, I think.
And what are you using?
This year I've been using my Marshall Master Volume head.
Wow.
Yeah. I know, I mean, last year I have a block head that's like a JTM 45 reissue.
Right. Yeah.
That's really Fendery. It's like it's kind of like an early basement or something. Yeah. And that's a nice default, like big kind of sounding thing. I don't use it where if you crank that thing up, it really does something special, but in the way it's really loud too. So I tend to use it as more of a fairly clean, kind of thing. That I used last year a lot. And this year, after playing with the band, and I've had this Marshall head for years. I don't know if you know those. It's like, I don't know what the number is, but they're like late 70s, early 80s, 50-watt master volume, 2-input. And it always was a great sounding thing. If I would bring it to sessions, I always like to say it was like totally idiot-proof. Like, could be an engineer that didn't know what they were doing. Like, somehow every time that amp just sounded right in the studio. And, it will do the Marshall thing. But it also, it has a range, it has some headroom, so you can get a little bit of a cleaner thing out of it. And so, after I played for a year, I just thought that would fit. And Bonnie likes a kind of rockin' thing from the guitars, she's not shy. And the band, the rhythm section is just, it's beautiful and it's huge sounding, I think. And Ricky Fattar, amazing drummer. It just very big, and Hutch has such a beautiful, big bass sound, like there's no shyness in those areas. So in some ways, like for me, I tend to go for a fatter, darker, thicker thing. It's like, that might not be the best because that's already covered with those guys, and just something that I thought the Marshall might just fit a little better. And it's fun having an amp that does something too. It's not, I don't have it set for all out gain, but it's definitely breaking up, and it's super responsive. So if I hit it hard, it'll rock, and if I turn the volume down a bit and play lighter, it really, it's a nice sound. In fact, some people don't believe me when I tell them it's a Marshall.
Yeah.
But it's got a range. It'll never have that round Fender thing. But on the quieter stuff, it seems to work. Because for me, even on ballads and stuff or quieter tunes, I tend to use some kind of overdrive if I'm using a clean amp. Rarely will I just use the totally clean sound. I don't know if that makes sense.
So when did you start doing that? Always running an overdrive pedal and never just using a straight up.
I mean, it's not always, but oftentimes. You know what? I think when I started doing that, when I stopped using a compressor, because I used to use one of those Boss compressors.
Yeah.
I can still hear it on my country soul guitar record.
Yeah.
I can hear the Boss compressor,
and
it's maybe not bad, but I used to have the Boss pedal board with all the.
Yeah.
But at some point, and it wasn't just then, it was a couple years later, I decided I want to move on. I didn't really dig the compressor thing as much for all the time and for what. I like to say, I think I used to use it because of whatever I was losing going through all the pedals, all the Boss pedals, like compressor and delay, whatever would make it do a little more.
Yeah.
And once I kind of got rid of some of that stuff and plugged back into the amp and realized, if I don't go through all this stuff, the amp sounds really good, and I'm getting way more out of the guitar than I thought I would. So in that case, for me, a substitute, because I still wanted some boost, like especially like I was still maybe doing more like volume pedal-y stuff, you know, I felt like, well, a little bit of, boost overdrive kind of took the place of what I wanted the compressor to do.
Right.
And it didn't sound like dirty necessarily. It just, for me, and especially in that role, which was like a little more ambient, it's thicker sounding, of course, but it just started to become my substitute for, some kind of boost.
And so what pedal did that? Which overdrives have you used through the years? or just
Which one did I use? I think,
because I'm guessing it's been a variety of different things.
And that's, slippery slope, because
Yeah.
now coming back around to like using this Marshall, it's like I have to use way less of that stuff because it's doing
Right.
it. And something happens when you use your guitar volume and all that. But I guess back then might have even still been a tube screamer.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember all the stuff I would use.
And you would just leave it on.
Yeah, I mean, not all the time, but if I needed that kind of, like some kind of boost and something more than just the amp. And also I think I was reconfigured, got rid of some of the Boss pedals. Not that, they all did nice things, but I didn't like what they did to the tone at the time. They just,
It gets rough when you run through a bunch of buffers. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just something that happens because everyone has a gain stage in there, and nothing's completely flat.
Right, and and I've heard some players that just sound amazing.
Yeah.
I think everybody has their own way of doing it, and depending on the instrument used and everything, it could be fantastic. But for me, mostly using Fenders, I always felt like that sound would, like, I'd lose body of the tone, and there'd be a brightness that I never liked that much.
Yeah.
And that was my revelation when I just started plugging into the amp. It's like, oh, the Strat actually sounds great, but it's like, well, if you don't take all that stuff out,
Yeah.
with that. So yeah, I'm guessing maybe might have been a tube screamer, but which is like a little bit more extreme for, a boosty thing, because that's got its own thing. That's
What do you
does.
What do you use now for that kind of thing when you're running in front of a Fender type amp?
So now I'm using the Mad Professor Royal Blue overdrive, and for years I used the Sweet Honey overdrive, because I felt like those they're good. They basically sound like the guitar. They maybe have a little more mid range, and they all do something, but it felt kind of natural, for just that little bit of overdrive.
I want to ask about your playing technique, because it's one thing seeing clips of you playing and then seeing you in person, and especially your right hand. Your right hand, it just seems to move around just the slightest bit, like you have some kind of economy of motion going on. So tell us how your kind of right hand technique came about. One, using the pick and fingers, which I think a lot of people could think of as kind of a country technique. Not saying that it is, because a lot of people in other styles.
Yeah.
But how did you come upon pick and fingers, and how did you come upon your right hand and the way you play?
The right hand. I think the right hand. It's funny. I don't know if I think about it that much.
When did you first start using the pick and fingers?
So let's see. Probably quite a while ago, and I started playing the country kind of stuff. Maybe like late 70s, maybe early 80s. Mm-hmm. I started to get into that kind of playing more.
And what was it that inspired you? What were you hearing that was inspiring you?
So that era, I'd heard, like, growing up, we had like some country records. My big one was the Live from Muskogee, Merle Haggard record.
Yeah, that's a
just
killer
because,
one.
yeah, and I'm lucky because I have 3 older brothers and an older sister, so they had a pretty good record collection. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't have heard that record when I was 10 otherwise, especially being in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So I loved that, and I knew, I didn't even know, I don't think I knew who Roy Nichols was then, but guitar sounded cool, and I did, we had a couple other country records. But like in the early 80s, maybe it was a little later than that, but yeah, early 80s, Albert Lee, Ray Flack.
Yeah.
And then, Robbie McIntosh on the Pretenders stuff. Not everything, but, there was that.
Middle of the road.
Yeah.
And things like that. Yeah.
That was a thing at that time, And the Albert Lee solo on Sweet Little Lisa on the Dave Edmunds record.
Yeah.
And then Luxury Liner. That was all around. That was more mid-'70s, I guess, a little later. And then, mid-'80s, I'm sorry. And then Ray Flack a little later, right? A little later than that.
Yeah, that was early to mid-'80s.
The first couple of Ricky Skaggs records.
Yeah, yeah.
So all that stuff really got me turned on to that.
Yeah. And so did you take lessons from anyone that showed you, or did you just kind of pick that thing up? How did you figure out what they were doing? How did you figure out that they were using a pick and their fingers?
I don't really remember.
Yeah.
It's interesting, when to think about. Maybe I just kind of intuitively did it. I didn't take lessons. There was no one really around.
Yeah.
I took lessons from a great jazz teacher when I was coming up in high school and beyond. But I don't know that there was anyone else playing that kind of stuff.
Did he play with pick and fingers, or did he use
No, he was just pretty traditional grip,
Yeah. Yeah, it's because sometimes it's almost like you have to see it to be like, oh, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Where you see somebody, using the pick and the fingers, and you see someone do that, but it's an interesting thing.
It's funny. I've never thought about it because I think I would have known.
Yeah. It goes back to, and even watching people's right hands, it's like you have such an economy of motion where your hand is just right over there, and it's working hard, but it's not like it's going all over the place,
right.
or really, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe just unconscious and just naturally gravitate towards that. Also, I was never in a band where I did that much gesticulating or
Yeah. Yes.
It's not that's fun to do. I didn't really know about it.
Doing the windmills.
Yeah, or just even left-hand stuff. I see a lot of players where and it's cool. It's dramatic, and there's also cool things you can do with all that
showmanship and just
and
musical,
musically,
yeah.
But I guess I was always looking at the floor and playing guitar. So.
Yeah. So being in Boston and getting into kind of country music, so that happened with that Merle Haggard record, and then it seems like as you were in school and you were taking lessons and you did an album that I haven't heard before called Guitar Talk, that
yes.
And that apparently is somewhat of a fusion affair.
Yeah.
And then after that, the follow-up on that was Nobody's Home, which of course has a very strong, kind of roots in country, and blues and R&B, kind of influence. So first of all, how did you get a record deal? And then how did...
Amazing. Yeah. Well, the first one, the Guitar Talk thing happened also, and I'm in the process of trying to actually get that out again, some digitally or something. It's been hidden away for years.
Yeah.
But and it was more of a fusion thing. That came about because I won a contest. I don't know if we covered this in the last thing.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So maybe we don't have to get into that.
Yeah.
But anyways, more of a fusion thing and some regrettable unison lines that I made really good players play with me. But by the time, I did it myself, but so by the time it came out, I already had kind of moved on and decided that I'd like to do like an instrumental thing that's, I had already been playing country music a lot and rock and roll, and maybe I can come up with some music that's in that zone, instrumental music. And I had met a guy named Mason Daring, who's a film composer in Boston area. And he was hiring me to play on some of his scores. And he had a little label that he was putting some of his soundtracks out on, and he had a deal with Rounder Records and they distributed his label. Mm-hmm. And I've been working with him. He's like, why don't you, and I was playing with I had an instrumental band that was playing pretty regularly back then. And like I said, by the time Guitar Talk had come out, I had already kind of been starting to do this other stuff. And he had maybe been to see the band and knew that, I was doing. He's like, why don't we do a record? I'll put a record out.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So I owe a lot to Mason, and he put those 3 records out for me.
Yeah.
That one and Country Soul and Lava.
Yeah.
And Rounder was distributing his label, which wasn't technically on Rounder, but they actually, especially Country Soul Guitar, they really promoted it. For someone who I still didn't tour or didn't really leave Boston, it's really a lucky thing. It's pretty. I remember I actually got into South by Southwest that year, and I don't know what it's like now, but back then, it was like, it wasn't as huge and sprawling, I think, that festival, but it was a big deal for me, and I would have done it, but it was, at that point, I got the gig with Chapin Carpenter, so.
Yeah. Country Soul Guitar was my introduction to you, and
Right.
I remember there's a record shop here in town that's still here called Phonolux, and I just remember seeing the CD, and it was there, and I thought, the cover looks kind of interesting. It was like
a good cover.
Country Soul Guitar. I was like, that sounds like straight up my alley. And then I remember, it started off with I think it's going to work out fine. That was just such a great, of course, there were the different arrangements of the tunes, and it has some similarities to the Ry Cooder.
No, that is the Ry Cooder arrangement.
Yeah.
And I did credit that on the record because it was so unlike any version that had happened before of that tune.
Yeah.
It was very unique.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to have a great band on that record too. Yeah.
And I'll just ask this, like on I think it's going to work out fine. What gear did you use on that?
So that was my Tele. I have a '63 Tele.
Yeah.
And I think I had just gotten it recently. That I still have. It's blonde now, and it used to just, at the time, it had no finish on it and all that. And I think it was my Boss pedal board. And I think on that record I used my Vibrolux reverb and an AC30 together.
Wow.
I did go over this, when I was doing my own channel.
Yeah, on your Patreon thing, I think you did cover this.
And my friend Chris Rival, who engineered and mixes all my stuff, he remembered, and I think that was it, or maybe I actually had an AC15 at that time too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
why
sounds
did I?
great.
Yeah.
Why did we get rid of
It
stuff?
might have been those two things
Yeah.
together. I was into kind of using 2 amps, but so it was some combination of that.
Yeah, that's a great record, and one of the really great things about the album was just its rootsy quality, especially coming out of the '80s and early '90s. It was still kind of a rack time, and so hearing like guitar and amp sounds, and then also hearing melodies and such, because most of the time when you went and bought a guitar instrumental album from that era, it was usually going to be a lot of look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah.
And so the closest you got to that was like Nashville Skyline Rag, which was kind of supposed to be that kind of thing.
Get all the licks out.
Get all your fast playing out. But there were a lot of different moods, and it was nice how you kind of continued to make these albums that were enjoyable to listen to, and also were kind of like soundtracks. And
that's cool.
And
Thanks.
even of course through the fade out, which was kind of I guess also kind of even referencing the fact that somewhat kind of soundtrack music sounding. And really enjoyable.
Thanks.
Let's get on. So Chapin Carpenter, you got the gig, and that was one of your first like big gigs where you were you were on a bus and everything like that. I guess let's take a quick sidetrack to Jonatha Brooke and The Story. So because you had like Abe Laboriel Jr. and those were some really fun records. That, I guess, were you still in college when those were being made, or were you?
No,
out at
I
that
think
time?
I might have just been out of school Yeah, no, I was definitely out and playing around town a bunch, and the Story records came before that, which was the duo that Jonatha had with Jennifer Kimball.
Right.
So we all played on those records as well. LMLA, who was Jonatha's husband at the time, beautiful piano player, and my friend Ben Whitman, great drummer. They produced the Story records together. Then the Story broke up, and then Jonatha went out on her own, and LN was, had produced those records. But yeah, there was a fun time, and he had, I think it was good. I just talked to him recently. I think it was good. Everybody grows as a musician if you're a good musician, right? So I think he was happy that at that point, he had already learned a bunch just from producing a couple records, as you do.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of a sweet spot there, and yeah, the band was unbelievable on both. Yeah, it was Plum and 10 Cent Wings.
Yeah.
It was Abe and Mike Rivard, who I still play with a lot today, on bass, and Alan, and me and Jonathan.
And same kind of gear that you would have normally used.
I think at that
on
point,
those records?
I think on the Jonatha records, I think I remember using my AC30. I think on that more than the Fender thing. I might have had both, to do different stuff. Similar, yeah, and I think I still had a Strat that I was still playing Strat a little more regularly than I did a little later.
Yeah.
And a Telly, and what else did I have back then? I think I had a couple other guitars, but not that many.
And is that what Mary Chapin heard before she hired you?
She had heard the Story record.
Right.
Right before, yeah, their second record. That's how she kind of knew about me, and her management team had come to see a Story show in Boston, and they didn't play with a full band all the time, but it was like the record had come out and we were doing full band gig, and they were thinking about working with them, her managers, and I don't think I even met them that night, but I got a call like not that long after that there's a guy named Tom Carrico who said, I think, heard you play at the gig, and Mary Chapin's looking for somebody, and she's heard the record and all that. So that's kind of how that happened.
So you get the gig with Mary Chapin Carpenter, and that's probably your first kind of big tour. And tell me about the the transition of kind of like going from working with Jonatha and doing like smaller tours, because I remember you doing a date here in Nashville where it was basically the drummer was also playing bass, and you had Jonatha and you and one harmony singer, and that was kind of and I'm assuming y'all were probably in a van or something like that,
Actually, I think that was maybe around the time I started playing with Mary Chapin. I think I might have been here, but yeah, basically any of the stuff I would have done, maybe some festivals. I'd played some blues and jazz festivals, and been on some bigger stages and stuff like that. But yeah, very not a lot of it.
Yeah.
And nothing like that. So the transition was, all right, I'm doing this gig. We rehearsed. Did we rehearse here? I think we rehearsed here maybe. Big production rehearsals and all that. And then the first gig was at the Grammys. That was a transition. From nothing to, playing a song on TV and that.
And the record that she was releasing at that point was the one where it was basically John Jennings and Stuart Smith playing on most of the record.
Stones in the Road.
Yeah, Stones in the Road, right.
Yeah, so Stuart had played on the record, and I I think they had wanted him to do the gig, and he was busy and couldn't do it. So that's where I got the call, and she would usually do a thing where on her records, where she'd do like a week with her touring band and then a week with a guest band with John. I mean, Jennings was the producer and would be on all of that. And that kind of morphed over the years, but at the time that was an MO, which was kind of nice. So yeah, and I think, it's possible Stewart played on all the tracks, later, or overdubbed, the ones with the band too, the touring band. Beautiful stuff. But yeah, that was that record.
Yeah. So, and that was probably also one of the gigs where all of a sudden you're having to learn someone else's parts instead of having cut the stuff, and you're kind of covering. Tell me about the late John Jennings, and things that you learned from him, being out with him on the road as both kind of like the band leader and also as a producer, and you as kind of a little bit of a young guy.
Ton. Yeah. John was just an amazing musician, amazing guitar player, just really kind of sublime, and his acoustic, his touch on acoustic guitar is just really unique and beautiful, and same with electric. And to me, it's like he just always played perfectly. Beautiful time, beautiful feel, a lot to aspire to. And I was kind of the dude who was a little more like rough around the edges and, trying to keep up for me, But it was, again, it was a pretty good contrast of playing style and sound, I think, for that gig. Just everything about, learning how to play in bigger places and just a whole different scene. I don't think we were playing a lot of arenas even that year. That was a big year for her. And, festivals and big outdoor sheds, and that was all new. So all something to learn, I guess, just by doing, but also John was super gracious, and whatever I needed to know or ask him about, it was always helpful.
Yeah. What were the challenges of playing on the big stages?
There were stairs. Stage. I was like, this must be the big time. There were some steps that led up to like a place over there where the bass player was. Yes. And then the drums were way over on a riser. The drums wasn't just in the middle. So just getting the mix up, and just the way everything felt, in a big room or on a big stage was just different. I mean, I'm not sure I know how to describe it, except that just like anything else, you're going to learn by doing it and figure it out. She was really welcoming, and everybody was. So that there was no any tension that, except for self-imposed, for my, like on my, being hard on myself for playing or whatever. But that really made it easy. Did you have to make gear changes from what you were using before to kind of? I didn't really know to do that. Yeah. I just had what I actually at the time, I remember now, I had a super reverb. Mm-hmm. And I think I still had that Boss pedal board and a volume pedal. And yeah, I don't think I brought my super reverb and AC30. I had an old AC30, the first one I had. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I think I just wasn't as right for the gig, but I had it out on the road. I think I was using the super reverb, and at one point it got trashed, because the old amps with that shelf that's going to break. Mm-hmm. So, and at some point I stopped taking that out, but I don't think I ever really used it on the gig. I didn't. Which is probably smart. I mean, I think if you're going into a situation that's new in a lot of different ways, I think it probably makes sense. And just note to self now to use what you're used to, at least to start from. Yeah. Because otherwise, you're throwing a lot of other variables into the works.
Yeah. And there were lots and lots of television appearances.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, for that record. And then, through the years, for sure.
Yeah, because Letterman, Austin City Limits, Conan, just on and on, all the TV shows of that time
Even
period.
I think we did Talk Soup at one point. Yes. Well, yeah, there was a bunch. So, and that was all. That's definitely a learning curve, as they say. I mean, there shouldn't be. There's nothing,
What
weird
was
about it
yeah.
except that it's just nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I think.
Because of the live audience and the cameras and everything.
Cameras, it's like, all right, recording can be a little tense, but now you're recording and shooting, and you got to play it right once,
Yeah.
which you should be able to do, right?
Yeah. But did you ever screw it up?
I'm sure I did, but not too badly, I don't think. We did Letterman once, and not my fault, but I guess there was a big hum in whatever the rental amp was. And I didn't usually have a lot of hum in my signal chain, I don't think. And apparently he had to redo his announce of her because there was so much noise
Wow.
coming from the amp. And I would think, well, why can't, but maybe it was that loud, it was bleeding into his mic or something.
Yeah.
So, not my fault.
It's not my fault.
I don't think it was my fault. But,
Hey, tell me about one of the kind of really interesting facts is the pianist with Mary Chapin was in the Starland vocal band.
John Carroll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was a really odd kind of connection to make when that was made, and then to think about Sky Rockets in Flight, Afternoon, and the huge success that they had.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, and even to the point of they had David Letterman as the writer for their show that was on.
They had like a summer replacement series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's really kind of a snapshot of the music industry, of just kind of just how big you can be, and then you can be doing something completely different. All of a sudden, you're playing acoustic guitar with a vocal band, and then you're singing and playing piano, and that's kind of like a snapshot of the music industry.
Yeah.
It's like you never. What are you going to be? It's like you enjoy it while it happens, but it's like the old saying, "This too shall pass," and there'll be another thing that will be fun.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, was one of my favorite musicians, amazing piano player, and he was then, I think, just played guitar in the band, and he did all the vocal arranging of that song as well. He's an amazing singer.
Yeah.
But he was also, I think he was still a teenager when that happened, and because they were all DC. That's the connection there.
Yeah.
That band and Mary Chapin was based in D.C. And yeah, just, even they won a Grammy for that tune, and they were huge. And then he's such a great musician, of course, that he hooked up with Mary Chapin at the very beginning as well. So he had really long, great history with her, but also played with a bunch of different people and he's a force, as a player and a singer.
Yeah.
Still doing great stuff now.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing's guaranteed.
No, nothing. But having other lives is really interesting and cool in itself. So what caused you to finally get off the road with Mary Chapin?
Well, I think it was a few different things, but I just wanted to do something different, and it's a great gig. I loved it. I loved the people, and I got to the point where I was getting on the bus, and it was like, it was just, I loved everyone, and I didn't want to see any of them.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not their fault.
Yeah.
That's just it can get to that point where I knew that I should take a break.
Yeah.
Just from that routine, and also just different experience. And a couple other things actually happened that weren't the reasons, but I felt like maybe there was something telling me to take a break. One was, and I don't mean to make light of this, we actually flew into New York on 9/11 that morning.
Yeah.
So we were about a mile from that, and less when it all happened. And that's, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing,
that's heavy.
It's heavy. Yeah. And then that same year, I think, we almost got in a really horrible accident with a bus, and because we had an incredible driver, he just zigged or zagged the right way, and we were all fine. But there were that's another scary moment.
being in a near accident on a bus is very life changing because there's something about when you're in a vehicle that big and it's going down the highway and then all of a sudden something happens and you go off off the road, and it's one of those things where you think you're going to fall over
Yeah.
or you think all these things are going to happen, and when it miraculously you get back on the road or you're able to stop or something, it just feels like it's worse.
It's a reminder
Yeah.
that it's
worse than being in a near accident in a car or something like that because it's just this big hulk of steel going down the road.
So yeah, neither of those would have necessarily gotten me to take a break from that kind of touring, but it just felt like the time where I needed to take a break from it.
But what a great experience, because of course she
incredible.
She had you playing on her records right after that. I mean, you were.
That was the other thing. Yeah, it was really cool that I got to play on the records with her, and I think sometimes I got to be on both sessions, with the guests and the band. So yeah, and everything about it was felt really creative, and as well as a great road gig, and just she's a great artist,
Yeah.
Always came up with beautiful tunes, and luckily I still get to work with her. So
Nice.
by the way, in case you ever run into him, I'm sure you know Glenn Worf.
Yeah.
He has the best horrific bus story. I can't tell it, but next time, if you see him next time, I think it was his first tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll ask him. So then you get off the road and you kind of stay in the Boston area, and you're doing local gigs, and you've continue to release some solo records, and you're continuing to do, I guess, some soundtrack work and other session work and things like that. And let's see, you had like Beneath the Blue and some of your solo records. Tell us, because how do you go about writing some of these instrumentals? How do they start coming together? Is it something
Sheer luck.
Is it something to where you're just messing around with the guitar and things start coming up? Do you have, or is this something away from the guitar that kind of happens where melodies happen while you're going for a walk or something like that? Or
Not that too much. Usually just sitting down and playing, and sometimes just getting some kind of groove, a loop or some kind of drum groove to play to.
Yeah.
That can be really get me going in a direction. So once in a while, it'll be like there's this little thing I can do on guitar. Maybe I can make a song out of it. This little peculiar way of playing. Or I take a lot of inspiration from Jim Campolongo in that regard, because he's made whole tunes of beautiful things out of, like, oh, he took that one thing, and whether it's the behind the note harmonics, or there's that one tune where the melody, it's like, oh, he was tuning up that A string along with the D string and thought it sounded cool, and he made a song over it.
Yeah.
So that can be a good source of inspiration. Lately, I've taken to, like, just feeling like I don't have to write a whole song of just an idea. If I'm messing around with an idea, just sitting around playing, I'll put it down, record it on the phone or whatever for later, and mostly forget about it forever.
Yeah, and then go back through them and
I just started doing that again, and actually it made sense, and I actually got a couple ideas, which was good. And again, I watched one of Jim's things where he said, well, one of the keys to writing the tune is finish the tune, which sounds so basic, but it's really true.
Well, it's hard.
That's what I never did. It's like, oh, I got this. I don't know what else, but
because you come up with this germ of an idea, and then to try to get, like, the difference between maybe a verse and a chorus, and then the idea of a bridge and things like that, and something beyond just a lick.
Right.
Yeah.
But one of the things, for anybody doing it, I think to keep in mind is it doesn't have to be, well, at least for me, it doesn't have to be a monumental work. Yeah. It can be a couple simple ideas. If it's played beautifully and it has some kind of direction and concept in general, It can be a cool thing. And I think that's what Jim was saying too. Well, okay, I just need another section. What would that be? And don't let option paralysis sink in, where it's like, well, what if it was this? Well, is that the right thing, or does it sound like something else? I think try to go with your gut and yeah, finish it. Which I'm guilty of not doing.
And that kind of dovetails into, like, I guess what you would call like pre-production work, like before you record, is, trying to finish tunes and pick things out. And I guess, what did pre-production work look like when you were making like Lava or Beneath the Blue or something like that, where you were, kind of on a, distributed on a label under the kind of the old system and the old system of recording, where you didn't have the home studio that you could just,
I mean, I didn't have any pressure from any record label, so that was one thing that was really nice. I knew I could do whatever I wanted to do. But Mason would, say if you liked the tunes or not, or sometimes he'd think, oh, that should be a first tune, or in a nice way, he'd have a little bit of input. But mostly I get to do whatever I felt like doing.
Yeah.
So, for that one, well, for Beneath the Blue, I just got as many tunes as I could together. I had a handful, and this is true with most of my records. I have a handful of originals, and it's usually like half covers too.
Yeah.
But I enjoy trying to come up with unique ways of playing a cover. So that takes all the writing lessens that kind of pressure. And Beneath the Blue, and the last couple records, I would do a session. I'd book 2 or 3 days with the band, and of course record probably more than I needed. And as usual, I just didn't, for whatever reason, whether that song isn't as great as I thought it was, or I didn't play that great on that, I ended up doing more sessions. I just figured, well, just because we recorded enough material in this amount of time, for me, I felt like, well, I just want it to be as good as it can. So in the case of Beneath the Blue, I just would find a couple other songs and book another session. It wasn't a huge deal. I get my friends, Paul Bryan and Jay Belrose played on that record, so it's like, well, get them back up from LA, and I can, for another day. And that really, and then I did that a couple times on that record, and then I did a day with a different rhythm section where I got a couple tunes that I really liked. So that was kind of the process, and however inefficient and maybe a little more expensive than I had imagined it would be, it worked out. And the same with the last record as well. I did a similar thing. I did a bunch of days with those guys, and then as I kind of thought of, it's like, maybe I need a better tune, come up with a better song, or maybe a different cover to try. And that just seems to be the way I felt like I was happy with it. Yeah. And especially not having, maybe if I had a week or 2 weeks in the studio, maybe that wouldn't be the case. And I think for me, feeling like I have pressure to come up to finish it in 2 days or something, just because I had done it before, doesn't mean it always panned out that way.
Yeah.
And also maybe it's not the best way psychologically to be playing music, thinking that you have to get it done.
Yeah. Okay. List off some, it's always hard to be objective, so this is just about what you feel best about, you enjoy the most. Of your own recordings, what are some of your favorites?
Favorite tunes? Or?
Yeah, that you've recorded on your own material.
On the last couple records, I really like how Caravan came out on Beneath the Blue, and largely pretty much due to the band that came up with something amazing. I mean, I did come up with the idea of doing it in 3, but...
Yeah, the arrangement on that, and the fact, because that's a song that's been done so many times instrumentally, and it's been done by guitar players, and the fact that, it's like I've got versions of Roy Nichols playing it, Les Paul, and all these other things.
Roy Nichols one's great. Yeah,
and just the fact that you came up with, you kind of, Not that he's the first one to do this, but you kind of John Leventhal'd it, you know.
It's a very good compliment, but thank you.
You,
But the rhythm section came up with something like just, of course, beyond what I would have imagined, which is why they're so great. You know, so I really like that. I guess I like a lot of the of that record. I like the Beneath the Blue on that record. I just the way that came together, and it's a trio thing, which I hadn't really done before.
Yeah.
So it's kind of pleasantly surprised. No surprise, another fantastic rhythm section. Dan Reeser and Mike Rivard.
And the openness of just having 3 players and is
And I think I embraced it where I didn't feel like I had to make up for what wasn't there and all that. And just again, the players are everything. You know, they people like that make you feel like you can do that, and you can just do whatever. They got you. You know.
Yeah.
It's just in a beautiful way. So. Those couple I liked. I liked the Blob, how that came out on that record again. The band was unbelievable. The last record, I feel like I worked on it enough so that I would be happy with it. Mm-hmm. So largely I was. Lava had some good stuff on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't listen to it, but that's a good question. And there's not a lot that I look back on and feel really badly about.
Yeah.
Which is good. I
That's
know,
a good thing.
And if anything, for me, I feel like, okay, that's a thing that happened 25 years ago, 30 years ago, but my silver lining is that I'm glad I can play better now. Or I'm glad that I feel like I've made some progress as a player listening to older stuff.
Yeah.
That makes me feel.
Yeah. Any favorite sessions that you've played on for other people?
Yeah, a lot. Peter Wolf sessions, always really fun, and always felt like I could play like I play, and always also amazing players. I really loved doing this record. Did you know who Dick Curlis was?
Yes.
We've talked about him before.
We haven't talked about him before.
So I got to play on the last record he ever did, and that felt like a really special moment in time, even then. And again, I look back on that, and it's like, well, I could play that better now, but that's not the point, you know. It's just that's just I don't listen to it that way, but that was a really kind of a cool thing to be involved in. Jonatha records, were really fun. The last couple Mary Chapin records I really enjoyed because they were maybe 1 or 2 overdubs, but it was everybody in a room playing together. Drums, everything, you know, real like playing to the room and get what you get, and I love doing that. And for her too, and I think that was new for her, but she rose to that occasion. There's a bunch. I got to play with Cornell Dupree on the first sessions I did for Wolf.
Wow.
He was on the session.
Wow.
So there's that.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, it's classic. I was setting up, you know, we're at Sear Sound in New York, and he was there, and I heard him play one, you know, classic. Went, I was like, played one note.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah, there it is. And I got to do a session with Reggie.
Yeah.
Once. I think we'd probably talked about that with Mary Chapin.
Yeah.
I played like an ass. He played beautifully. I go back and listen to it.
What was the tune?
It's a cool tune. It's called Wherever You Are.
Okay.
You know, there was 2 tunes on. She had like a record that was kind of a collection of maybe B-sides and a couple live tunes called Party Doll.
Yeah.
And it was that. There were 2 tunes that we both played on. Like in one day, we just cut 2 tunes. It was that was a thrill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'd like to go back. Would have liked to have gone back and played with Reggie Young 20 years later, 15 years later. I mean, I think it was okay, but Yeah, those are a few.
Yeah. So you're in town to play on a session with Wade Bowen, and you know, of course, Tom Bukovac called you for that, which that's very cool. It's always an honor
Very
for
cool.
another great player to ask you to play on something. And then of course, there's the Austin City Limits that you just taped with Bonnie, and that'll be showing.
Yeah, I think
in next year, 2024.
I think they say maybe early next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So yeah, having to, we did 2 gigs. There's that venue there that they do the venue or the show. So we did a gig the night before, and then George came back and guested on a few tunes on that too.
So is George kind of off the road at this point? Is just kind of guesting?
Yeah, he's basically, he was kind of on his way to leaving the band and just ended up staying, for some of that last year, which was great. But yeah, we still keep in touch, and he's I think he just made another record for himself.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What a great player and a great guy.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
All right, Duke. Let's talk gear.
All right.
And, first, it's great. It's great you got a Telecaster. So tell us a little bit about this. This is not your old one.
No, this is a '53 Relic, they call it. I think it's a really good guitar. The neck feels just pretty much like my '53, which is really good. It was all heavily relic, I guess, when I got it. I got it from Willie's in St. Paul. And it, had the couple little bit more modern things like bigger frets and a little bit of flatter radius. So, and I put some, some angled, little bit more in tune saddles on it. So yeah, just for, especially my original guitar is just a little, it's amazing, but a little more finicky, just tuning wise and whatnot. So like I've come to use this a lot, like for sessions and when stuff has to be actually in tune
and also you flew here and
that too, yeah.
And so it's not the most fun thing flying with a vintage guitar. So,
yeah.
So
I probably wouldn't do that. So.
And is it the stock pickups, or you change those out? Or
I think I did change the neck pickup to, is it Don Mayer?
Yeah.
You know who he is?
Yeah.
I bought a set of his pickups, and I liked the neck. I just the one it came with, the neck pickup it came with, it was too bright for me. I tend to like the darker neck pickups on tellies. I think mostly because of the middle sound just sounds nicer to me that way.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of a clearer thing with the neck, but yeah. So the one it came with was bright, but I ended up liking the stock bridge pickup. I don't even know what it is. It's Fender. It's from the custom shop. It's a flat pole pickup.
Yeah.
But it was kind of dark, which I liked. Again, I'm usually, it's like not that dark.
Yeah, you get a better in-between sound.
Yeah, I think so. And it's a pretty warm sounding guitar, and it'll rock a little bit without being super gainy or anything. It's not super hot, but it's nice.
Tens?
Yeah, the tens on this.
Yeah. And what kind of pick have you been using?
I've been just using the Fender Heavy, usual like kind of teardrop shapes. And you know, it's funny, when I think we were emailing one time and you asked me, were we talking about picks, and you asked me which side I used?
Yeah.
And I was like, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Because you use it like that, right? So
yeah, a lot of times I won't use
you
the
show
point.
me like how you would grip that.
Yeah, so that's how.
Like that, right?
Yeah, and I use that rounded thing.
I tried it. I was like, it's genius. No, it is. It's
well,
that's what I always like. You know, and my friend Chris Rival, who I record with all the time, will tell you I became super tweaky about the attack of.
Yeah.
I was always trying to get him. It's like, could you just take some of that? Like, and you know, I don't have that bright a sound, I don't think, but I think some of it is just pointy.
Yeah.
So I still mostly use that, but I have. It's really nice. Plus, you get a lot out of one little thing.
You do, yeah.
It's great.
That's very fun. I stole that from Reggie Young. Yeah, that's
really?
what Reggie did.
Did he always do that?
Yeah, he always did that. He never played with
and
the
it's
point of
amazing the
yeah.
difference, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people, you know, if you just turn the pick around, just.
Do it take you a while to get used to how that feels in your hand, or it doesn't really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Wouldn't me. So let's see, tens, and that's your pick. And this pedal board. So you're using one of my deluxe reverb today, and because you're flying in, and of course Tom's going to be providing with you. I mean, he's going to have like 20 amplifiers
I hope
for
so.
you to
He
choose
better.
from.
Yeah. He said it was a deluxe, but
Yeah.
I was like, that's it.
That's it. Yeah. What else do I get with this?
I think
so.
I'll be
This
all right.
this looks like your grab go around town kind of board that of course you've flown with, and I love how you're really careful about trying to minimize the amount of stuff that you're going through. And so like earlier, this first pedal wasn't even plugged in, and because you were going straight into that Royal Blue overdrive, and then you've got like this other pedal that's not plugged in at all either, that's still up to the side, and then you've got this kind of loop AB box thing from Radial that you're able to bring things in and out of the chain, and so tell us what the signal flow is here, so that because I can tell that you're really trying to get as pure of a signal going from the guitar to the amp.
Yeah, that's basically where it's at, and I'm probably insane. But for me, when I got on that trip of like, all right, how close can I get the guitar with the pedals to sound like the guitar and the amp?
Yeah.
I figured, well, the fewer things you go through, the better it's going to be, and you'll get more. Basically, you'll get more response from the amp, from the guitar, I think, And I know people do that with buffers as well, and that can do it in a certain way. But I still don't think it. There's some really good buffers now. Actually, the guys at Jam have a really good buffer now. That sounds really close to the guitar without it doing the typical things I think that buffers do. But for me, I was like, all right, how few things can I use? But I like a bunch, I have what? Basically on a gig, these two pedals here, I might use one or the other. That's why I don't have them both hooked up. Or I might have another little loop pedal if I want a couple other pedals in the chain. So basically, I figured if I go through, and it's all true bypass stuff, which I happen to like as well. If I go through three things, then I feel like it's pretty close. Three true bypass. So, and when I had if I'm playing like mostly, clean stuff, and I don't need a big, overdrive sound. I would just, that's why I didn't have this hooked up. I was just going into the Royal Blue, into this AB box, and then it goes from there into this deep blue delay at the end. So that's three things.
Yeah.
And then I can switch. I have these three pedals, this Bell Epic and the Jam Waterfall and Harmonious Monk on a loop. So I can switch all those out because I'm not using them all the time.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's negligible, It's like, yeah, it might not sound as pure, but I don't notice a huge difference.
So number one is taking you to your tuner, and then number two is the loop that has the delay and the two jam modulation type effects on there.
So I feel like for me going, and I also shorter cables, most gigs I do, a 10-foot cable is cool on either end.
Yeah.
And cables, that's a whole other story, as we know, right? Because they're all different too. I happen to like these. I think they might be a little, the Dario Planet Waves, maybe they're a little darker than some, because I know there's some more hi-fi cables out there, but maybe because I've gotten so used to it. It's just my point of reference at this point.
Consistency is so important, because every time you insert another variable or change something else out, that's another thing you're trying to adjust to instead of making music.
That's the joy in the despair of all this stuff, right? Everything makes a difference, right?
Yeah. It's just like turning the pick. And there's so many things that do make a difference.
Yeah. So that's my shtick, is that if I can go through as few things, so basically either 3 or 4 true bypass things I go through, I still feel like I'm still getting kind of a correct thing.
So basically two drive pedals and this deep blue delay from Mad Professor. So how would you use the Royal Blue versus the heavy hand?
The Royal Blue is just like for a little bit of overdrive, and then the heavy hand is a more of a grindy.
And the Royal Blue would be one of those things that you would potentially leave on for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and depending on the amp, so like I say, when I'm playing this Marshall amp, I don't really need anything like that, because the amp responds in a really nice way. If I'm a lot of times around, all other gigs, a lot of what I use is my Vibrolux reverb, which is a basically clean sounding thing. I feel like there's probably more instances where I'd keep on a little bit of overdrive for that.
Yeah. And your board with Bonnie is basically like this, but bigger, and it's got a few more options on it.
It's similar. I've got an Octavia kind of pedal, because there's a couple guitar solos on her records that have that kind of thing that George did.
Wow.
Yeah, and she really digs that. That's like something I wouldn't normally use. And then I have like a digital delay that Source Audio Nemesis. Because there's just like a couple tunes that need like a certain timed delay, digital delay kind of thing, and it's got some easy presets. So that I use that. That's in a loop with this stuff, and then I think I had like three different overdrives, just because like, what if I need this? What if I need that? And again, that's kind of streamlined a little bit using the Marshall, where I don't kind of feel like I've a couple different ones will do.
Let's hear the difference between those two overdrive pedals.
This is the Royal Blue. Might have a little more than that. And then of course, like this lead pickup's always going to make the pedal do more. So like, it's really for like an in-between sound. It's apparent, right? Or the neck pickup. To me, it's like, it still sounds like the guitar pretty much, and it's really nice. It has bass and treble. So that comes in handy, because just because, you know, like you're not stuck with that one sound that the
Right.
overdrive
You just
does.
have basically a treble knob. You know,
Yeah,
like
or a
some of the-
tone knob, which,
Yeah.
you know, it can be cool. So yeah, that's that. And then this heavy hand thing, I kind of dig because it's got, it can do a lot of different things. It can do something that's more like that. And it's more open and subtle. And I tend to use it where it's heavier. And this has a bottom control as well. So like, you know, for me, that sounds pretty close to like what the guitar should sound like. It'll do something that's a little less, a little more open, which, you know, changes all the stuff. You know, it's pretty close.
And then you've got this these two jam pedals up
Yeah.
top. One of them's doing the vibrato thing,
Yep.
and the other one does different. The harmonious monk. Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah.
It does the two. It does different forms of tremolo, whether it's kind of like the brown face kind of thing, or the straight up opto, you know, tremolo like a blackface amp.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So this was, yeah. So this is kind of the harmonic.
And the tap doubles the speed.
Yeah.
It's not.
Useful. And then
Yeah.
yeah, it does the normal, you know, kind of trem too. And it's, you know, it's got a couple different waveforms, so it can do more extreme things. Yeah, I really like that one. And then this waterfall I use mostly for the vibrato, which is just nice, and I use it kind of subtle.
Did you use the old Boss vibrato pedal back in the day?
I
for
did,
that
yeah.
kind of thing?
I still have a couple of those. Those are really nice.
Yeah.
It's funny, I went back and after not having used it for a long time, and I still really like it, but I've really gotten used to this one where it's just, it's a little different and just...
Probably has less noise issues than the original.
Was the original noisy? I don't really remember.
The original one was pretty noisy. Yeah.
Also,
But
you
it
know what?
sounded great.
This one, also, what I love about it, it on the vibrato setting, it really kind of thickens the tone. Again, I come back to all that, like I'm always looking for, but you know, to almost add some warmth to it, which again, I'm probably in all the effects stuff. I mostly try to get stuff where the guitar still sounds good.
Yeah.
And I've had some effects that I really liked, but all of a sudden it sounds like the buffer to me, or you know where the tone gets too bright when you turn the effect on, that kind of thing. So I'm really careful about that. And this Catalan bred Echo, the Bell Epic, their Echoplex has you know the Echoplex preamp in it, or it's that style preamp. So it's maybe a little, does something a little brighter, but it's super musical to me, you know, and whatever it does to the sound, I like. It doesn't feel, you know, it does it in a nice way. Like, I'm not always averse to having something a little more present if it feels nice, if it's musical, but.
Couple playing questions.
Yeah.
when you're soloing, are you thinking, scales, patterns, chord tones, just what comes underhand? What are some things that come to mind when you're soloing in the heat of the moment?
Hopefully none of that, right? No,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
just being flip. I mean, hopefully
Yeah.
you've done all the work so that
Right.
it goes from here to there.
So that you can
But
just
no.
react. Yes.
And sometimes I always like to think. Sometimes for me, I have to like consciously remember to not think about it or think about a melody, and
Yeah.
whatever. Just not. Obviously, there's always going to be times where your hands just go where they like to go, which is okay and handy. No pun intended.
Yeah.
But yeah, ideally, it's you play what you hear.
Yeah.
I guess that.
It's
You have something in mind, maybe, or a direction, or a concept or a vibe, how you're going to go about it. If it's a rockin' tune, I could think of players that I like,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, maybe. And it never comes out sounding as good as they do, but at least a direction, kind of. And I guess if it's more and more. I just try to really play melodies, and this sounds basic. Play melodies and have them develop from where you start. Don't give up. Don't jump around, which I'm guilty of doing. It's like, oh, I'm playing this, and I'm up here, and I'm doing this because I got to play this lick.
Yeah.
All that stuff can come into play and does sometimes. But if I'm just paying attention to what I'm playing and thinking about the melody in my head, it's always going to come out better. And I think I've made a conscious decision to practice that way too, instead of just practicing where I'm just trying to get licks under the fingers, or doing that thing where you're playing all the notes to make sure you hit all the different changes, which can be really useful, especially if you're playing over like, jazz changes. I've consciously, whether it's playing to backing tracks or a tune. It's like just practice with that thought in mind instead, to just be musical.
So
in soloing.
Yeah. So try to drill that down and get really concrete. So what would be an example of that? So let's say you'd have a track that was like chord changes, and then you're gonna try to challenge yourself just to think straight melodically.
Okay. So start out with a simple idea, and then, either repeat that idea or repeat it with a different rhythm.
Yeah.
Repeat it in a different octave. These are really basic things. Repeat it. It's like many people have used it. The last time I saw someone talk about it was Pat Metheny, where he said, it's like happy birthday is the thing, right? Happy birthday to you. Little variation.
Yeah.
One more variation, so that's kind of like really basic, but incredibly true.
But that's great. Yeah. Yeah.
So if I'm playing, like, say, there might be one go around, and then pretty basic, and doesn't do a lot, but hopefully it was paying attention to where the first lick or the first melody and going from there.
Yeah. That was very cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, well, hope it makes sense. But yeah, it's always still working on it, like we all do.
Well, Duke, I really appreciate you taking the time to come down here and sit with us and tell some of your story, and it was a ton of fun.
A treat for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Zach.
Duke.